Philadelphia, get ready to be inspired. If you need help finding the light in the darkness, don't touch that dial. Let's navigate life through the lens of hope with Scotty P. Inspirational speaker Scotty P speaks the importance of mental health in society and encourages techniques to overcome the everyday mental health obstacles that hold us back in life. It's not just inspiration, it's Scotty P inspiration.
Good evening, Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. Thank you so much for being here again for another episode of the Scotty P Inspiration Show. I'm so thankful that you're here today. I really think that you're going to be able to start your weekend off on a positive note. And what we talk about today is going to help you to navigate life through the lens of hope. All right, so once again, everybody, thank you for joining me. My name, if you do not know, is Scott Prendergast, aka Scotty P. I am your host. This is my show, and I'm super thankful to be doing this today. And shout out to WWDB 860 AM for making all of this possible. Now, real quick, if you want to watch previous episodes, because we just had our 10th episode last week, we're doing some things out here. If you want to watch any of those previous episodes or this episode, if you're listening to this a couple weeks in advance down the road, you can go on Spotify and search the Scotty P Inspiration Show. You can go on Apple Podcasts, search the same thing. You can go on www.dbam.com and search the Scotty P Inspiration Show. Listen to it that way. Or my personal favorite, you go on my YouTube channel, which is Scotty P Inspiration, and you can watch it and see the video as well. All right. So you have no excuse not to watch it. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for being here, everybody. And we're going to jump right into it today because that's what we do. That's what I love to do. So let's do it. Okay. For those of you who have seen the show before, you know that I love to start with a quote. I think it's a good way to just kind of get the juices flowing, get some things going so that we can really dive into the topic. And today, I have a really good quote, short, sweet, but it gets the job done. Quote is this: disappointment is the nurse of wisdom. Disappointment is the nurse of wisdom. And this was by old school dude from, I think, Ireland or England. His name was Boyle Roche. So shout out to Boyle Roche. It's a great quote, though. It really makes sense, though, doesn't it? Because today, this episode, and what I want to talk to you all about is the other side of disappointment. Okay, because we all know the one side of disappointment, feeling let down, feeling inferior, feeling like you don't matter, feeling you failed, right? We all know that side of disappointment. But what I want to share today is how there's a flip side to it and how disappointment can really be used for the good in a lot of ways if we choose to view it that way. And this quote by your boy Boyle here, or whatever his name was, really illustrates that, right? By saying disappointment, it's the nurse of wisdom. So you can't have wisdom. You can't have certain good things in your life without first going through a little disappointment. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's do it. We got the quote. Let's jump into it. One of the things that I say a lot, I said this at a presentation recently when I was speaking to a business that I spoke at. Every disappointment gives birth to a new opportunity. Now, here's the thing, though. That sounds great. It sounds awesome. But when you're really going through it and you're in the middle of one of those disappointments, it's one of the hardest things in the world, right? Because disappointment means that you had to get your hopes up for something, which means you had to put effort into something, which means you had to try, which means you had to be vulnerable, put yourself out there, step out of your comfort zone. And those are all difficult things to do. And then when it doesn't pan out, you kind of feel like, well, why did I do all that? I made a fool of myself. People are laughing at me. What did I get from that? It was nothing but pain and hurt and sadness, right? And I think that's a normal response to disappointment. And you have to allow yourself to feel that. Unless you're some type of robot, when you're disappointed, no one's going to be like, whoa, let's go, baby. I'm disappointed. Whoa, come on. No, that's just not humanly possible, I don't think. And I'm not telling everyone or suggesting we should do that. What I say is that you got to feel that disappointment, allow yourself to have that time to kind of, in a way, grieve that lost hope, right? And to grieve that time and effort and energy that you put into something and having it not worked out. You got to grieve that a little bit. Give yourself some time to recover. But there always comes a point where we have to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, I've done my grieving process with my loss of disappointment here. It's time for me to take something and learn something from this and move forward. And that's where the other side of disappointment comes in. Because if it weren't for disappointment, I would have to say that most of the modern miracles and things that we have nowadays would not be here. If the Wright brothers didn't go on the other side of disappointment, we wouldn't be flying around. I wouldn't be flying from state to state speaking, would I? Had Thomas Edison not going to the other side of disappointment, we wouldn't have electricity, right? So these people all experience disappointment. Pretty much anybody who's done anything has experienced disappointment. But the difference is, what do you do with it? Do you allow that disappointment to identify you and to define you? Or do you choose to define that disappointment yourself and mold it into something much greater? Now, this isn't always easy to do because, like I said, when you're really going through it, all you think is just, man, why didn't this work out? I tried so hard. This couldn't have been any worse for me in this situation. I feel like I'm just nothing. I feel like I have no value and nothing matters for me, right? I know that feeling all too well and still deal with it now with this business I'm trying to grow. It can be disappointing at times, but it's because of that disappointment that I try new avenues, that I learn new skills, that I find out new things about myself that I didn't previously know. And the same goes for you, the listener, in whatever aspect it is of life, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in your job, whether it's in family matters, you name it, whatever it is. Even if it's just something simple like playing a video game, you get disappointed, you didn't level up, well, you learned a new way to try to beat the monster, whatever it is that you're fighting, right? Disappointment is all around us. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So the question is, how will we respond to it? And what are we going to do with it? And I think today, I really hope that when you leave this show, you'll be able to look at disappointment in a new light and not run away from it, but rather when it comes into your life, allow yourself to feel it, acknowledge it, and then say, let's get to work. How do I move through this? And how do I become better because of it? And that's what we try to do here at the Scotty P Inspiration Show. So I was saying how every disappointment gives birth to a new opportunity. I want you to think about it like this. Disappointment is a pit stop. Okay, it's not a destination. I think a lot of times that's where we get it messed up. And for you, the listener, I want you to think about a disappointment that you've had in the past week or two. Anything, could be whatever, just any disappointment. Think about it. And did you view that disappointment as your destination and beat yourself up because something didn't go right? Or are you viewing that destination as just one stop that is getting you one place closer to that ultimate goal? And think about it kind of like this. The other week, I had a presentation out in the Pittsburgh area, and unfortunately, I had to drive out there. For me, from Philadelphia, that's about 6 hours. So I drove out there, and a few times when I was on the turnpike, I had to stop at pit stops. I had to get gas, I had to go to the bathroom, get a couple snacks, because your boy likes M&Ms and stuff like that. So come on, I need some chocolate, something like that, maybe some Cheetos. I'd say about 2 different times on the way there and the way back, I stopped at pit stops. I knew that that pit stop wasn't my destination. But I did know that I had to go there in order to gain the fuel and mental strength, so to speak, to be able to keep driving to get to where I needed to go, right? Now, in the same way, for you, the listener, in your life right now, when you're going to that disappointment, when you're experiencing that disappointment right now, you have to look at it the same way. Not that all your work has failed up to this point. Nope, that's not the way to look at it. But instead, you're saying, okay, this is my first pit stop. But I'm going to get back on the road and I'm going to get you one step closer to my goal or to whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. It's a pit stop, not a destination. And I think when we really look at it through that lens, it really changes a lot for us. It gives us some of that hope. It takes some of the pressure off. And it's less demoralizing too. Because when all of a sudden we're not telling ourselves, all my work was for nothing, but instead we're saying all my work has led me to this point. And now I'm going to have the strength I need to get to the next spot. I'm going to have new wisdom, new insight, new things that I didn't previously know, but now I do, right? So all of a sudden, disappointment really has shifted shapes for us and looks a lot different. And so for the listener, for you today, really, really hammer that home into your head. This disappointment is a pit stop. It is not a destination. It is a pit stop. And at this pit stop, you better believe I'm going to get 3 Musketeers bar and some M&Ms and a Slurpee. Then let's go. Then I'm going to get back on the road and I'm going to keep going. And then maybe I'll have another pit stop. That's fine. That's why there's so many. Okay. And for the listener, I really, really want you to take hold of that today because I think it's so important. And especially in this life where disappointment, like I said, is inevitable, but how we view it is so incredibly key. Now, we've got still a few more minutes before we go to our first break. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. Anyone who's listened to me knows I love analogies. I love metaphors. I love putting things in a simple way that's maybe a more complicated term. And I was thinking today as I was coming up with this idea about disappointment and how it's really all throughout our lives, right? I don't think any of us can go throughout a single day without experiencing some type of disappointment. And when I was thinking of it that way, I figured, wait a minute, disappointment, really, we view it wrong. It's not something bad, like I was talking about. It's really something that's essential. And I started to think of it kind of like it's glue that's holding things together, right? Because let's think of it this way. If you try to build something without glue, you might be able to stack all these things on top of each other, right? But the slightest wind or slightest pressure of any point is going to knock it over, right? So you need some glue to stabilize it. That one good experience, that one block, can't just go on top of another block. Because if it does, sure, it looks like it's okay, but the wind comes, blows it down. You put some glue in between those two bricks, in between those two blocks, whatever you have, all of a sudden it's sturdy and strong. So I think of it like this. Every accomplishment that we have is like a brick. That's one brick there, one brick there. And then before we can get another brick on top of that, we got to lay down some foundational glue, right? Some caulk, some whatever bricklayers use, that type of stuff. That's what disappointment is. It is the next level to get us prepared for that new block, that new brick, that new experience, or whatever it might be. And I was thinking of that, and it totally transformed my own view on looking at disappointment, not as something that I hope I don't run into, but something that I know is part of the process and is actually just as essential as the success that I hope to have is too. Think about that. Disappointment is just as essential to success as hard work, perseverance, determination, any of that. Disappointment is just as essential. Because without disappointment, that key ingredient, we're not going to make it. Because then we won't develop our mind in the way that we need to. Because disappointment is that little kind of kick in the backside, so to speak, that lets you say, hey, you know what? This way didn't work. Maybe this way will. Or, I did pretty good on that, but maybe I could do great. And we don't get there unless that disappointment is present. And I think that right there is something that is just very difficult to do. But when we get that mindset down and when we really understand that, I think some powerful things can happen. And for you, the listener today, I hope that's something that you really, really are able to put into practice in your life. And say, hey, these disappointments have been part of me, but they do not define me. These disappointments are part of my experience, but not all of it. But they are just as essential as anything else. We look at it like that. All of a sudden, things start to change. Okay, everybody, we got about a minute or two before we go to our commercial. And before we go to the commercial and start the second half of the show, what I want to do is, because I love this to make this a listener-focused program, and so I want you to do a little something. I want you to, whenever you get the chance, write down 3 disappointments that you've had in the past year. Now you might be saying, Scott, I've had a lot more than 3. That's great, yada, yada, yada. But write down 3, maybe 3 of the biggest. And then when you write down these 3 big disappointments that you had, I want you to write down when they happened and how you felt. And I want you to just look at that. And then I want you to take a look at your life right now and see if any of those disappointments led you to a greater place, led you to learning something new, led you to a new path. And I want you to reflect on that and think about it and get that in your head, because it's important to remember this stuff so that the next disappointment you have, you could say, hey, I remember when this happened, but look where it led me to. And we kind of take away the sting of that pain, of that disappointment, right? So do that for me. And I think that'll be a great way for you to be reflective, because all of these things we talk about begin with being self-aware and reflective, okay? So everybody, we will be right back. Do not leave yet. We got so much more information to talk about the second part of the show. I'm fired up. We're doing some things. Let's go. Stay with us. So we will be right back talking more about disappointment and the other side of it after these quick commercial breaks.
Hey everyone, Eric Katz here, the owner of Katz Dogs Canine. Are you working from home and need to get your dog out running around for the day? Will you be traveling this summer and looking for a place to board your pup? Is your dog looking a little shaggy and need a haircut or bath? Are you looking forward to walking around and enjoying this beautiful weather, but you can't because your dog's pulling like a freight train? Well, you're in luck. We're a one-stop shop that focuses on daycare, boarding, grooming, and training. We're located at 35 Middle Road, Percy, PA, on 10 beautiful acres. You can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at CatsDogsCanine or our website, catsdogscanine.com. Our phone number is 855-CATS-DOG, 855-528-9364.
What's going on, everyone? This is Scott Prendergast here, aka Scotty P. Real quick, I want to talk to you about my business. It's called Scotty P Inspiration. And what I am is I'm an inspirational speaker, and I want to help others navigate life through the lens of hope. Now, I do this through speaking engagements, but also one-on-one life coaching. So if you're interested in booking me or doing some of that coaching, let me know. Check me out at www.scottypinspiration.com or check out my Instagram at scottyp_inspo. Find Yourself Boxes was created to foster the connection between a person and those in life who may be working through mental health challenges by providing curated and customizable boxes filled with research-backed wellness products that promote healing. Coupling personal experience with professional mental health guidance, Find Yourself Boxes meets people where they are on their journey. Wellness doesn't look the same for every person, and these products are packaged together to touch various aspects of our wellness spectrum. Find your healing with Find Yourself Boxes at findyourselfboxes.com, and you can get 20% off your first purchase.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for staying tuned with another episode of the Scotty P Inspiration Show today. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on this Friday evening to get your weekend started, to help find some inspiration, talk about our mental health, and ultimately listen to me to help you, to guide you through and to understand how to navigate life through the lens of hope. Because that's what we're all about here. That's what this show's about. That's why we do this. So thanks so much again for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate it. We're doing this one a little bit different today. We are doing it from my place. I'm not at the WWDB studios, although my man Wes is still putting it down, getting it done for us. So shout out to Wes, my producer, for making it happen and being so flexible to do all this. We appreciate it. Now, everybody, if you're just tuning in, don't worry. I'll explain what we've been talking about. We've been talking about the other side of disappointment. And what I mean by that is viewing disappointment not in a negative lens and not through all the difficult, unattractive things that come with it, but rather viewing disappointment as really a stepping stone and as an essential piece to our growth and development in our lives. And what we talked about a lot in the first part was how, hey, disappointment is just as essential to success as hard work and determination and anything else in life really is. Disappointment is one of those key ingredients that you cannot skip. Because it's because of disappointment that we are driven to be greater, to find new ways, be more innovative in whatever that aspect is of our lives, right? And that's what we're talking about today, viewing disappointment in a positive way instead of such a negative, detrimental way. Okay, so I'm really excited about this. We got a lot more to talk about here, so let's kind of dive right into it real quick. But real quick, before we do that, just understand if you want to watch any of these past episodes, you can go on Spotify and search the Scotty P Inspiration Show. Apple Podcasts do the same thing. www.dbam.com. You can search the Scotty P Inspiration Show. And last but not least, you can go on my YouTube channel. That's Scotty P Inspiration, and view the videos as well for all the past episodes of the show. Okay. Now, diving into it, getting back into it so you can start your weekend on a positive note. Let's go. Yeah. Disappointment. Okay. One of the things that I was thinking of over the break here is, when we have a disappointing situation, we're so quickly tempted to fall into that negative self-talk cycle of, why can't I do anything right? Why don't I matter? What did I do wrong? Why can't I be like those people? I'll never be like them. I'm too much like this. It's really easy to fall into that trap. And for anyone who listens to me, you know that I talk about this a lot and how to break some of those traps. So in the same way here, I think what's really, really important is to flip the bag, so to speak, flip the script on how we're going to talk to ourselves when we come about a disappointing situation. Because the fact is this, you're going to be disappointed probably within 10 minutes after listening to this show, or maybe 20 minutes, or maybe a day. But regardless, you're going to experience that disappointment pretty quickly again, because that's just life. Now, the next time it happens, I challenge you to do this. Instead of falling into that negative self-talk, when that disappointment comes about, say, okay, what do I now know about this situation that I didn't previously know before this disappointment occurred? And I'll say that again. I want you to say to yourself next time you experience disappointment, what do I now know about this situation that I didn't previously know prior to this disappointment? Now, by doing this, we are doing a few things. Number one, we're working on being self-aware. That's always key. You know, I talk about this a lot, that is so essential. But number two, we're taking the sting away from that disappointment. Because a big part of why the disappointment hurts so much is because we view it as a failure, because we view it as something that is being taken away from us. Like, couldn't accomplish something, we couldn't pay the bill, couldn't do this right, couldn't do that right, whatever, right? But instead of viewing it like that, by phrasing it in a different way, now all of a sudden we view it as something that is adding to us, something that's building us up, something that is ultimately getting us to a much greater goal and or experience, whatever it is, right? Because it's all about how we talk to ourselves, right? And one of the things I'm a big proponent of is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the idea. Now, granted, this sounds real fancy, right? It sounds like, oh, you need to be a professor from Yale or Harvard or Oxford to understand that. No, you don't. That's the beautiful thing about it. This is something you as a listener can do right now. And what I'm talking about really applies to it. Now, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the idea that our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are all connected, right? So if it starts at the thought level, though, if we can change what we think, we'll change how we feel. If we change how we feel, we'll change how we act. If we change how we act, we're going to have different thoughts. You see where I'm going with this? This 100% plays into what I'm talking about right now. Instead of getting down on ourselves and picking ourselves apart because of a disappointment, instead, now we're viewing it as something that is going to help us rather than hinder us. Something that is, as I said before, essential to us, and something that is helping us to build towards something greater. And I want you, the listener, to really do that today. And like I said, I'll say it again. I want you to ask yourself, what do I now know because of this disappointment that I didn't previously know before it? Work on that for whatever it is in your life. I guarantee those answers are really going to be very telling for you, okay? Now, as we're moving along here, we're kind of trucking along into the second part here of the episode. One of the things that I think is really powerful for us as humans is our ability to collect experiences. I did a whole episode about being a thought collector and talking about the experiences and thoughts that we all collect and have in our lives, right? And I think that's something we do subconsciously. Now, what we might not do as much is understanding that when we collect these different experiences, disappointment is constant within all of them. Right? Like, think about your best day you ever had. There was still disappointment that played into that. Think about it. Let's say your best day you ever had was when you got your new dream job, right? That's an amazing day. That's an awesome thing. Well, guess what? You would not have applied for that new dream job. You wouldn't have got that new dream job if it wasn't for a disappointment that happened at some point of your life. Maybe you didn't get into the college that you thought that you wanted. Maybe you got fired from a job before. Maybe you had to take time off because you got sick. Whatever it is, if you trace that lineage of your situation back, you're going to find a disappointment. And that disappointment really propelled you forward. And so let's remember that when we're collecting our different experiences that we had in our lives, whether good or bad, but let's remember that disappointment played a part in that. And that's where we talk about that other side of disappointment, because it wasn't bad in this case, but rather it was used for good. And I know somebody else who talks about using all things for the good. You can look that up too and see who said that. Very powerful man that said that one. Now, I think that one of the things I really hope that you as a listener is going to be able to get from this today is being able to really decrease the time, I like to say, that you spend in the dark place. Now, I know that sounds a little weird off the cuff. You're like, well, Scott, I can't always control when bad things happen to me. Absolutely, you can't. No way. That's called living life. You can't control that, right? However, if we change our mindsets in a way that is going to be more productive and forward thinking and positive, we can really shorten the time that we have to stay in that dark place. Now, I'm a big proponent that dark places are essential. I've never been one to shy away from that stuff. I'm not going to sit here and say I like it when I'm struggling, because I don't think anybody does. But I know that good stuff comes from it. And I think that's why I did this episode today, because it's based off of that. And what I want you all, the listener, to understand is that if we can learn to view these disappointments as these collected experiences that have helped us to get better or get closer to something that we want, when you have that next one that happens, it's going to not derail you, so to speak, for so long. Here's a prime example. I remember when I was younger, I got cut from my high school basketball team, and it was devastating to me because prior to that, basketball was my life. I loved it. It was everything. It was all that I cared about, all that great stuff. And when I got cut from this, I spent probably the rest of my high school years, a good 2 years, being so mad and angry and frustrated how it didn't work out and just wasting those years. Well, not wasting those years per se, but just being in a pretty difficult spot, right? Staying in that dark place for so long because all I could think of was this disappointment and all the bad things that came from it and how I wasted all this time and how it was all for nothing and yada, yada, yada. Well, flash forward now, about 10 years, I'm doing this, I'm making this episode. But the reason that I share that with you is because I know what it's like to be so angry and frustrated with the situation. And in a way, it's so comfortable to just swim in that disappointment, to just swim in it and make the world your enemy and say, oh, well, you did this to me. This world did this to me. I never chose this. This isn't fair. I think it's so easy to stay in that. As weird as it sounds, it's comfortable to be in that mindset. And I remember being there myself for many years. But when I look back on that now, I'm able to say because of that disappointment, I got into inspirational speaking. I got into writing. I got into starting my own business. All these things that happened because of that initial disappointment. And so I think about, okay, let's say instead of spending 2 years sulking in that disappointment, what if I only spent 2 months in it? What if I had this mentality back then and I was able to say, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm acknowledging it, but boom, we're moving forward through it. Who knows what could have happened, right? And so for you right now at your life, take that into stock. Know that you only have this day and you don't want to spend all these days holding on to that disappointment. Rather, you want to flip it over to view the other side of it, which is what this whole episode's about today. And I think that's just something that I really, really want to impart on you, the listener, today. I'll keep saying it again because I want to make sure you get that from this episode. Okay, we got a few more minutes here before we wrap it up. One of the things that I think is really important as we get to the end of the show is understanding that you didn't always do something wrong when it comes to a disappointment. Because I think we have a tendency to put that on ourselves. We think, oh, if there's a disappointment in my life, whatever it is, I must have done something wrong. There must be something wrong with me. I must have messed up. And I'll be honest, sometimes you did. Sometimes you did do something wrong. Sometimes you did mess up, right? That happens, but not every time. Disappointment is not synonymous with you messing up. It's not. And I think it's super important to clarify the difference between the two and know that they are separate so that you don't put yourself down constantly. I always like to think that for years, I was kind of like a professional at putting myself down and being my own worst bully, really, because of what I would say to myself. And a lot of that was because I thought every disappointment that I had was 100% my fault and was 100% because I wasn't doing something right. When in reality, that is not the case, right? Disappointments sometimes are out of our hands and we have no say over it. And so for you, the listener, remember that just because there's a disappointment today doesn't mean I necessarily did something wrong. It doesn't mean I'm not good enough. It just means that this disappointment is here right now and I have a choice on what I'm going to do next. I'm going to stay in it or I'm going to flip it over and use that other side, just like we talked about. Now, to kind of wrap this up, we've got about a minute and 20 or so left, give or take. Disappointments are guaranteed, right? I mean, we all know the old saying, people say like, oh, the only thing guaranteed in life is death and taxes. Oh, I never heard that one before. Well, here's a new one. Death, taxes, and how about disappointment? That is inevitable. That is going to happen. You can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be there. However, we'll end with this. Just because disappointments are guaranteed, you know what else that means is guaranteed? That means that growth is guaranteed. Because with every disappointment, there's an opportunity for growth. And it's up to us whether we choose to view it in that way. It's up to us whether we allow that growth to happen, but that opportunity is always there. So instead of getting down on yourself, getting down on life, saying, disappointment's inevitable, I can't escape it, what's the point? Flip it and say, yeah, you better believe disappointment's inevitable. But that means that growth is inevitable too. And that means that I have unlimited potential to grow into this amazing thing, because every disappointment I have, I'm gonna learn something from it. Every disappointment I have, I'm gonna get better. Every disappointment, I'm gonna help myself or somebody else because of it. And that all of a sudden, that's a powerful thing. And I hope as the listener, you really, really get that today from this. So everybody, thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being such a great audience. This is Scotty P talking about the other side of disappointment. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you later. Tune in next week. This is Scotty P signing off.